Good morning and welcome to the program. I'm your host, George Rideout, and always working the soundboard is Lynn. I've been, again, experimenting with Skype, and I got some good feedback about the last one I did and about being a fly on the wall and coming in like, you just kind of walking in, we're sitting down, me and my guest having tea, and you just walk in the door as we're rapping. Author Celia M. Gunn. And the book is A Twist in Coyote's Tale. And A Twist in Coyote's Tale is an extraordinary encounter with a Native American visionary draws young Englishwoman Celia Gunn into a tribal struggle for cultural sovereignty and spiritual wholeness. A Twist in Coyote's Tale is the true life account of 6 years spent working alongside the Arrow Lakes Indian Band in the spectacular valleys of British Columbia, Canada, and the dramatic interior plateau country of Washington State, USA. Celia's inspiring personal journey entwines with the renaissance of the Arrow Lakes people and traces her own spiritual awakening in the midst of a living shamanic tradition. I invite you to be a fly on the wall. Here is Celia M. Gunn and myself. Enjoy. I know you had a pretty interesting life before even coming to Edgewood your first time. You lived in Israel for quite some time, which must have been quite interesting. When I went to Europe fresh out of high school, we were going to take a trip to Israel, but that's when the missiles were going over, because both of us wanted to go check out what a kibbutz was like, but we never got there. So I'm pretty sure that you were at one, if I'm not mistaken. So if you can, at that time, what was a kibbutz like when you were in Israel?
Okay, well, I was in Israel. I got there in 1971, and I was doing part of the great rite of passage of the 1970s, the hippie trail, going to a kibbutz, then going to go to India and Afghanistan and Morocco and that whole trip. But traveled across Europe. And when I got to Israel, I wasn't well, and everything was closed. I remember it was Shavuot, one of the religious holidays. I found this person I could stay with who was a friend of a friend of a friend kind of thing in Tel Aviv. And then I went to check on the kibbutz that one of the kibbutzes I was hoping to go to, kibbutzim actually. And of course everything was closed because of the religious holiday. And then something happened that I didn't go to that one, and I went up north to Rosh Pina, and there's a kibbutz close to Rosh Pina in the north that is largely English people. When I got to talk to the person who receives volunteers, I was quite shocked, because I guess I was so idealistic that to find everybody had their own little apartments, and there wasn't this sort of communal dining. They all had their own kitchens and everything, and that was sort of a little bit of a shock. And then their children came in, just coming out of school kind of thing, and they were about age 12 and 15. And one of them, I remember he had bright red hair, just looked at me and said in Hebrew, which I didn't understand, but I had a friend there who told me what he'd said, "What's she doing in my chair?" i.e. me. I was so appalled. It kind of, it was rude, He is a guest, and I'm being interviewed, and I'm sitting in this kid's chair, and he doesn't like it. And it upset me. And at the same time, just shortly afterwards, I was talking to a volunteer, and she told me that, she said, that the volunteers never get to mix with the long-term residents, because we're here today, gone tomorrow, and they never bother with us. So I was there for all of 4 hours.
I think I would have followed suit. I would have been there and gone real quick. I also had a vision of communal living, everybody pitching in and doing something, and then coming together at supper time, kind of having a big potluck.
This is exactly what I imagined also, and what I hoped for, and perhaps even more idealistic than that in terms of everybody doing everything together. And I think this was just at the time when the kibbutzim was starting to turn, that people were starting to move from that communal way of life into a more of a separated, individualistic style. And I think I just landed on the crest of the wave of that change. And so be it. I turned my back on it, and then I got a job at a dude ranch up on the Galilee. A dude ranch is it's a place where tourists come to stay, and then they go horse trekking out over the hills around the Sea of Galilee. And then I saved up enough money from that to go down to Jerusalem. And when I got to Jerusalem, holy smokes, I just fell in love with that city.
Why Jerusalem?
Well, it was just going I came down from the north. I went down through Akko and the Crusaders bit, and all of that was all so romantic. And this was still, it was very easy to get around. It was a time, I think it was still, I always think the high spot for Israel, the high time for Israel was between the Six-Day War in 67 and the Yom Kippur War in 73. Those 6 years was when everybody was really very open and friendly, Arabs and Jews.
Right.
And so getting around was very easy. So I just made my way to Jerusalem. And I remember even hitchhiking in and being dropped on the crest of one of the hills and looking down over the city and being so excited at this whole beautiful city spread out at my feet. And as I walked down in, I was called Blondini. There were these two Arabs sitting smoking hubbly bubbly in one of their hookah pipes. They asked me to come and join them, so I did. And it was like a great welcome. And then I went down to the youth hostel, and then the next morning, an Arab guy came in, very smartly dressed, and young man, very good looking. And he said he was checking amongst the residents to find extras for a film. And so I let in, because I was living on a shoestring. So I immediately got some work for about 10 days as an extra in this film. And that sort of held me in Jerusalem, perhaps longer than I might have otherwise. And as I was held, so I started to feel this extraordinary, it's such a magical, mystical city. What can I say? My memory is that it held me in talons of gold.
Oh, wow.
That's going to be the title of my memoir if I ever do one.
Nice.
About those 4 years. Because it's Yerushalayim Shel Zahav, Jerusalem of gold. And then it's like that eagle energy and that, that really high energy that just held me in talons of gold. So that I dropped all my plans to travel further, studied Hebrew, learned Hebrew, and then began to study Judaism and actually did convert to Judaism, which it took about 2 years because they're not a Messianic kind of religion. They don't like converts. They really discourage you.
Right. Well, I had to say similar, but a kind of altering, life-changing experience in Turkey. And I can't really even put my finger on what it was about it that did it, but I came out of Turkey a different person.
Well, this is what happened to me. And in a way, I thought I'd found it. I was always aware that I was sort of searching for something. I've had that awareness since I was a child, since I was about 6, 7 years old. There was something I was looking for. And I even started back at that age, even just checking out the Presbyterian Church, the Baptist Church, the Catholic Church. I was raised Church of England. And then in college, going through Hinduism and Buddhism and socialism and communism and all the things you do in your 20s, your late teens and 20s. And then going to Israel and finding something in Judaism. I think because one of the early experiences there was I was invited to a dinner, and the dinner for Shavuot with this family, this extended family, and there was about 40 people at this dinner, and there was the communal life that I felt I didn't know consciously then, but I'm sure it was what I was seeking. Right. There was a sense of togetherness, this great extended family eating outside as is the tradition, you're eating outside, it's a certain practices you do at Shavuot. It was wonderful, and I got delegated to wash dishes, and I was happy to.
Cool. Well, that's where all the women chatted.
I saw right away how the men might lead the ceremonies, but the women ran everything.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
It appears like a patriarchal religion, but, it's the women, the Jewish mamas are pulling the strings every which way.
Yeah.
And then I went on to marry an Israeli, just to crown off my little trip, I suppose. Yeah. But then once we sort of realized we had a child on the way, and he'd fought in 2 wars and had enough. And much as I loved Israel, believe you me, I loved Jerusalem so much I can hardly, bear to think about how much I loved that land and how I felt for it in a very deep way. But to raise children to be basically cannon fodder was not my idea of how I wanted my children to live, or me to live,
Yeah, no doubt.
They would have to go into the army, and no way. And my husband also he didn't want to go on with this,
Yeah. So that was why you moved to Canada?
Yes, we emigrated to Canada. Yeah, he chose to go to Canada. I had this idea about New Zealand, but he was really keen on Canada, and I thought I'd be a good little wife and go along with my husband to Canada.
And so I'm curious, because my first experience with the rebirth of Mother Earth was unique. So I'm wondering, was yours also?
Yeah, it was really something. I mean, the marriage didn't last very long. We split up just a few years after moving to Canada, and then I was just sort of keeping my roof over my head and all of that, food in our mouths. I had 3 children, a single mum. And it was in 1987 that I came across the rebirth of Mother Earth. And this is very interesting because I don't know if you're into the Mayan calendar and Jose Arguelles' work, Joseph Silliman's work. Well, Jose Arguelles pinpointed 1987 as the year of the harmonic convergence.
Right. And
that was the year, in his interpretation, we were to get kind of spiritual boot up the bum. Wake up, you guys, come on, there's changes ahead and you've got to get yourselves in order and wake up kind of call. Well, I think I felt that in hindsight. I didn't know anything about it at the time, because that sense of searching for something or questing or looking for something kind of surfaced again. And I saw this little advertisement. I was living in Vernon in BC at the time. I saw this ad in the local little rag about this rebirth of Mother Earth medicine wheel gathering, native led, to be held at Edgewood at the summer solstice. And it was native led that actually got me, because I've loved Indians ever since I was a little girl, ever since the Lone Ranger came on TV in England. And it wasn't Lone Ranger I cared about. I fell in love, if you can fall in love when you're 5 or 6 years old, I fell in love with Tonto, that exotic dark-skinned and black-haired, and he spoke differently, and he was so beautiful. Well, I was, in my childhood games, I was always the Indian, and I played Indians long after my brother went on to play pirates and stuff. I just was the Indian scout and everything, so... And then when I was about 12 years old, I just combed the library for everything to do with Indians. And I read about Chief Joseph of the Nez Perce, and that was a story I just kept returning to. There was something really twanged me. This was age 12, 13, 14. So when I saw Rebirth of Mother Earth was native-led, I suddenly realized by that time I'd been living in Canada for 11, 12 years, and I hadn't actually seen any. They are not in Vancouver, where I was for 6 years, and then in Vernon for another 6 years. And I just never thought about it, really. But suddenly, here we are, and off I go to this gathering. And I've never been to anything like that before. It was something really special. I mean, I later learned that was I think it started off in 1984 in Squillax. And people like Rolling Thunder were at least invited if they didn't come. But in 1987, of course, was the year when Red Cloud, who is the founder, the visionary Cree elder who founded the gathering, he passed over at the gathering that year in 1987.